we were out here filming
Yeah.
The Bigfoot project.
Right.
I don't remember much activity that weekend. Am I wrong? Did anything happen?
We had a few things. Heather and I heard something like a little howl that come from back over there. Other than that, I don't remember for as much. I think we heard the drum or the metal sound a couple times.
Okay.
Then there was Adam. Adam and I were back here, and he said something seemed to rush down
He's
through.
taking a leak, wasn't he?
Yeah. I was standing just like right behind my truck, and he was on up, and he said something rushed down through the woods.
Yeah.
He heard sticks breaking, and he come running down toward that way.
Oh, shit. That's from the hill over there.
On the other side?
I would say that's over there. That's the hill. I don't know how far away that was. It didn't echo at all. I just got a tree knock.
I don't know, maybe if it was wind blowing a tree, you know how when they rub together? Yeah.
So what I thought I saw run behind you was light in color.
I don't remember where he went from there, but I'm pretty sure that's when we started discussing that. There's that noise again.
What direction is that noise coming?
I hear it coming back over here and then back over here so often.
So I was up by the hunting blind when I heard it. But it does sound distant.
Yeah.
It's not close, but it's weird. I don't know what that is. Okay, so Adam had the incident with the thing in the woods.
Yeah.
That also, I think, is the first weekend where we started seeing, like, the lights and all that kind of stuff. But, okay, so start us off. You're that night. Where is everybody? And then where were you when you saw the light?
You were standing like below, like close to these trees, or maybe up a little higher. Mm-hmm. Heather was sitting on the bench, on the porch. Yeah. And if you remember, at that point, that's when the porch went all the way across, and it was kind of the top. You couldn't really see much, you know, unless you're looking down. And I was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and I turned, because I said something to Heather, and I turned and looked, and I said, "Do you guys you see that light?" And I could see this red light over there. Yeah. And Heather couldn't see it because she was on the porch. And you turned, and you said, "No, I don't see it."
Dude, are you hearing this?
Yeah, I hear it. I hear it.
Yeah, there's something yelling.
Yeah.
Now that right there
that's a four-wheeler.
That's a four-wheeler.
Yeah.
So maybe maybe they're over there and there's.
I don't know. It sounds like something yelling.
Yeah. We got to go up there. I want to know what that is. I just heard what sounded like a person like talking at.
I heard that earlier.
I think if we go up this hill, we can cut across the field over by where I have my sighting. That's what I want to go do. There's noise up there for sure.
Yeah.
Les, do you have? We have a handy cam, don't we? Can I leave a handy cam with you?
Yeah. So
if something happens, you shoot yourself, like talk to the camera and do all that after. You don't have to do it while the stuff's happening, but I feel like I'm going to leave him. I'm leaving him the camera because I think there could be something tonight.
It was June 15th, 2018, a day I'll never forget. My girlfriend, Cindy, I said, hey, I'm gonna surprise you. I'm gonna do some fishing in Lake Cadillac out in Wexford. Oh, really, Rob? I said, well, yeah, we were dating maybe a year and a half, and I, being more of an outdoorsy type of guy, kind of want to introduce her to it. Wasn't really her thing. I said, yes, honey, there's shops. You can do some shopping, quaint stores, you know, it's just a good thing. Let's just get on the lake. So a friend of mine, he had a cabin he rented to me, and also hooked me up with a small skiff fishing boat. So we're on Cadillac, we get there, it was the middle of the week, everyone's at work, not the holidays. So we get out, get the skiff, get together, get out on Cadillac. Cadillac, a pretty big lake, sizable lake. A lot of homes around there, surrounding industries, businesses, restaurants. And so we're out fishing Cadillac, and then she's getting bored. We're about an hour into it. We got out on the lake at 10 in the morning. I tried to get her out there at 6 in the morning, you know, but at 10 o'clock it was. So we're out on Cadillac, and it's beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it was boring for her. We weren't catching anything. So I started exploring Lake Cadillac a little bit. Went over to Lake Mitchell, which is connected by a canal. Houses are there too. This is a nice sizable lake, but it backs right up to the Manistee National Forest. It's beautiful backdrop. But again, there's folks that live around there. It's not very secluded. Some sections are secluded. Where I went to, at the southwest section of the lake, was a little more secluded. So I have this little boat, and I'm drifting. I'm maybe 90 feet from shore, and Cindy's in the boat, and I started readjusting the fishing tackle, putting on some different lures, see if something different would work. When she says, hey, Rob, someone's tossing rocks at the boat. I said, what? And I didn't really hear anything. And I look, I see nothing. Yeah, Rob. I said, well, let me hang out with this, honey. Let me get our gear together, and I'll join you. She does it again, and I hear something, but it's almost like I said, yeah, that's cool. It's probably some fish jumping around. I said, look to the shoreline. The woods drop right into the lake. There's not a lot of area for people to hang out. There might have been, I recall like an 8-foot section that was kind of cleared out a little bit, but that's just from natural fall, trees falling down. Okay, Rob, she's a little perturbed. I said, I'll join you in a minute, please. She says, I'm almost done. Put my head down. Beautiful day on the water. We're like the only people on the water. Then I just look up for no reason. I see some object falling from the sky. I'm like, what is this? Not knowing really what it was right away until it landed about 4 foot from the boat. It was like a rock size of a baseball. So I, of course, feel like a dummy, and I'm like, I'm gonna go apologize to Cindy. Yeah, I guess there is somebody, but when I look to her, she's like standing up in this little skiff. I'm like, and I gotta say that Cindy was a sun goddess, a worshiper of the sun. Or she already had a ripping tan head to toe. Nice bronze color she had, and her body, what she had uncovered, she turned like white. She looked almost pale. I'm like, what is she looking at? I looked to the shoreline, and albeit they're standing there, there's this at least 8.5, 9 foot tall humanoid. Now you gotta remember, I'm like 90 feet and I'm even drifting in closer, so I get a good look at this thing. And it's wide, maybe 3.5, 4 foot wide. And I gotta tell you, beautiful, long flowing reddish brown hair. You can see it was covered in all this hair except for the chest area was gray, and the face was gray. And I gotta tell you, I seen this face. It looked like a human being that had some sort of, I hate to say it, like a stroke. I mean, one side of the face was kind of offset, eyes kind of drooped down a little bit, and the gray face was like this thing was 80 years old. It looked like it went through a war. It was just very odd looking. And I'm still processing this. I'm like, what is this, right? And so all of a sudden, this creature, being Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it, raised up its arms, and it kind of rolled back its like shoulders, and its head kind of dropped down a little bit. It drops its mouth, opens its mouth, exposes like, I've seen 2 sets of teeth up top, 2 teeth up top, 2 at the bottom. But this mouth opens, you could fit a softball in it. And then this guttural sound comes from inside it, and it just roars, screams, all in unison. not even moving the mouth. I get hit with this, and my vision is distorted. I'm seeing like through a filtered lens, if you will. The colors dissipated, turned like a black and white, not quite black and white, but very, very dull. And now I hear Cindy, she got hit with the same. Now Cindy at this time, she's 5'1", 109 pounds, a little thing. She fell into and the skiff is not very big, right? She falls off into the lake. Now, I try to go to my right to get her into the boat, but you guys, I can't move. I'm like paralyzed. Now I'm getting, on top of all of this going on, I can't process anything. I'm getting scared, and I just remember trying to shake my head. I gotta snap out of this, what's going on? I'm thinking. I snapped out of it, regained my vision a little bit better, the colors came back, and now I'm back to reality, because I don't know if I was even in a real moment at that time, it seemed like. Go get her, pick her up, get her in the boat. Now we look, I was really, on top of being scared, I'm even more scared because I look to the shoreline, this thing is gone. She says to me, Rob, what do you think that was, honey? And then I go, honey, I don't know, what do you think it was? I threw the question back at her, and she goes, maybe I think it was that Bigfoot creature.
When it comes to investigating the unexplained, there are few who have had more of a lasting impact than J. Allen Hynek. Born in Chicago, Illinois in 1910, Hynek, who became a credentialed astronomer and professor, is best known for his work as a scientific advisor to the U.S. Air Force on Projects Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book. It was Hynek who developed the Close Encounter classification system for describing UFO interactions, and it was Hynek who is credited with introducing another phrase still in use today: high strangeness. As Hynek conceived of it, high strangeness applied to cases in which a UFO was seen in conjunction with other inexplicable phenomena within the same event. Over time, through popular use, the term has been used more broadly to talk about any combination of impossibles in both the context of one event or spread out over time. And so it was inevitable that high strangeness would be applied to the subject of Bigfoot, based on observation and the human desire for explanation. In other words, the all-inclusive nature of high strangeness welcomes many theories as to what Bigfoot may actually be, ranging from UFO occupant to interdimensional portal jumper, and some even stranger suggestions have been posited.
Well, the two strange ones are the connection to the Nephilim in the Bible, and then that they're workers for aliens from other planets, and they come here to mine minerals.
A lot of times you hear things about them being interdimensional or paranormal in some way. I actually don't personally believe that they're necessarily paranormal. I just think they're really, really rare. But you hear all kinds of things about them being able to open portals and walk in between them and things like that. But I don't even know how you would prove that, though. It's a tough field to try to do alone, let alone trying to prove they're interdimensional.
Some of the stranger theories that have been put forward to explain what Bigfoot is includes things like the extraterrestrial hypothesis, that Bigfoot is some sort of UFO occupant / servant of the Greys or whoever is actually piloting these craft and are used in sort of a scout fashion, or they themselves may be the ones coming here from other worlds. That is maybe the strangest, maybe not, because there's other things like just a interdimensional entity suggestion that's made, that these things can pass through various realms that we're not able to normally perceive, and they can wink into or out of our reality, you know, presumably whenever they feel like doing so.
I'd have to say 100%, and I say that because it's an easy way to explain away all the weird stuff that nobody else can explain. I mean, it doesn't fit in our conception of reality.
One that I've heard throughout the years, it hasn't come up that often, would be that they're an evil being, an evil creature or whatever, and that they have the ability to appear or disappear again at will. Those are a few that I don't know if it's because there haven't been that many people with different theories, or it's just that I'm more on the closed mind opinion of interesting, unusual theories as compared to grassroots, down to earth theories such as a thing as a flesh and blood animal.
Well, a lot of times they associate it with strange lights in the sky, or they associate it with like disappearing in plain sight type situations, or orbs, for example, are involved.
Connection to portals is the big thing, you know, that they portal in and portal out. The Bigfoot can do it whenever they want and wherever they want.
Many people have used the term paranormal when describing their encounters with Bigfoot.
I've heard all kinds of things, whether you're talking about something extremely paranormal, you know, it's a spirit, or it is some kind of a shapeshifter, you know, that kind of thing comes up a lot in Bigfoot circles. To, it could be an alien, you know, something from another planet that either comes and goes, gets dropped off here, maybe does its own research and then goes back. And I'm not laughing because I don't know, that would be really interesting. It just would kind of scare me, so I wouldn't be the one to look into that. Bigfoot is paranormal if you're saying outside the normal, like we don't have the physical proof that science needs. So I've changed my mind on that a lot.
I've had people tell me about what we in the Bigfoot field call mind speak, what some people tell us that Bigfoot is communicating with me through ESP. He doesn't open his mouth. I mean, I can't see him open his mouth, but I can hear him in my head asking a question or telling me, don't be afraid, or don't come any closer, or whatever.
There is a supernatural aspect to this world, to this plane of existence, and I believe that. I believe we've been told about these beings, and they are, my current thinking is they're likely beings of this unseen realm.
You have the pictures of the footprint track line going through the snow and then just stopping and ending. How do you explain that?
That term carries many implications, conveying that something is happening alongside of or beyond the accepted norm. Something is being observed that does not conform to known natural laws. The result is often a sense of emotional overwhelm for the witness, because they're not only seeing a Sasquatch, but also experiencing phenomena such as telepathic communication or mind speak, or an abrupt blanket of silence falling upon the woods, or the presence of luminous orbs in proximity to Bigfoot.
Well, one pocket area where high strangeness in its true form had been seen and cataloged was, it's been a while, but in 1981, in Rome, Ohio, in Ashtabula County, there was a huge outbreak of incredibly strange things that happened. This is documented in a book called Night Siege that was written by Dennis Polichis, that interestingly enough, many of the same events were corroborated by another book called Strange Creatures by a man named Larry Peters. And he's actually named in Night Siege, so that puts both of these men, Dennis and Larry, in Rome in 1981. And it's just this escalating series of events that begins in late June of 1981 with the sighting of a dark figure on all fours with glowing red eyes. Not very specifically identified beyond that. But then the next night, the same family has a sighting at no further away than 35 feet of a 9.5-foot Bigfoot, black-haired, glowing red eyes, and things only get stranger from then, to the point where by July 1st of that same year, you have shadow figures in the tree line waving blue wands, UFOs being sighted flying overhead, those UFOs being shot at by this family. The UFO returns fire in the form of a light or a laser beam. And then you have a whole host of large Bigfoot-like dark figures with red glowing eyes approaching the family home, retreating, being shot at, evidently hit, falling to the ground, getting back up, going into the trees, coming back out of the trees. And this takes place over a series of a couple nights.
There was once November 9th, 2019, and we were at an expedition in Kentucky at the land between the lakes. In the trees, there's all these red bouncing ball type things that are glowing all over the place. And there was like at least a dozen of them. And I'm like, oh no, here we go. I don't want to look at it. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look at it. And sure enough, I mean, these things were in the trees and they were just darting around and they were red, they were bright red. And, I'm just like, I don't know what it is. It's not hurting us, they eventually went away. And then we went on with our night. And then later that night, I was down the road with this gal, Lori Russell, and up the road, there was Larry Sidwell and his crew. And all of a sudden we started feeling strange, and she said it and I was thinking it, I was just gonna say it, and then Larry gets on the radio and says, are you guys okay? And we're like, yeah, but we just kind of have the creeps going on right now. And he said, I just saw a Sasquatch run between you and me.
I just felt like I needed to get out of that area immediately. I didn't feel safe, and I had a companion with me. And she didn't feel that way, but I did. And I kept saying, let's go, let's go. She says, why? What's wrong? I said, let's go. I'll tell you when we're out of here, let's go.
You hear stories about Sasquatch and Dogman working together sometimes. I've heard those, but nothing like, oh, you know what I have heard? All right, Bigfoot, now this is the interdimensional side, the psychic side of Sasquatch. I've heard or been told that they can see through the eyes of eagles if they want to. So say eagles are circling, we have bald eagles here now, and they'll look through their eyes to find prey or a dead carcass or something of that nature.
Right away I thought about a sighting report that I took that was in Portage County, Ohio. And there was a gentleman who asked me to come out to, I guess it was kind of a farm. I mean, it was a semi-rural area where his house was, where he and his wife both experienced something. So we got on some side-by-side, and we went back to a big field where there was somebody else that would grow crops out there. And he and his wife were out there, and they saw something along the wood line that they said was walking, looked humanish, but was covered in hair. But the paranormal part of it was that it was changing colors. And so he was, I don't recall right now what different colors, but almost like if I'm remembering right, it was almost like a rainbow of colors that as it was walking, it was turning these different colors, and then it disappeared.
There's no question that whatever was on the opposite side of that set of railroad tracks was a bipedal, upright, walking individual that was extremely close to human characteristic.
I was very close. I actually have a couple pictures where we found tracks across a field, and it was across the whole field, but it was snowing so hard at the time that everything started filling in. So like, we were trying just to get pictures before it happened, that sort of thing.
While some investigators would prefer to turn a blind eye to these elements of eyewitness testimony, there may be some value in considering the paranormal aspects of a brush with Bigfoot. For reasons that continue to elude us, a Sasquatch sighting can sometimes be rather unlike sightings of other animals in the forests of the Heartland. Here, of course, the researcher must rely on the recollection of the eyewitnesses, who, on occasion, express far more than just a sense of awe and wonder, reporting incidents that skirt the bounds of a merely physical interaction with an unknown primate.
I was driving, actually a taxi that night, and I was picking up a girl that closed a little tavern in the town of Fountain, Michigan. This particular night, it was 2 a.m. There was no cars on the road, on Fountain Road. And it was just me and her. We came around this little bend out of Fountain. The road curves and then it straightens, and we went up. There's a slight hill. I wouldn't know if I'd even call it a hill, but it does come up a little bit. And once we got over that hill, we both at the same time noticed these eyes. We didn't know they were eyes at first, but we noticed these two kind of yellow glowing objects off the side of the road. And she saw it too, and she's like, "Jay, what the heck is that?" And as we get closer to it, I was gonna come to a complete stop. But soon as I said I was gonna stop, she reached over, she didn't say anything, she just slapped my leg and she's like, no, you're not stopping, But I just went as slow as I could. The last time I looked at the speedometer, I was below 20. And we're coming right up on this thing, and there's a big tree, and it's standing just on the other side of the tree, but enough that you could see its whole upper body, its shoulders, its head. It had long hair, like grayish white colored hair. It wasn't dark at all. It was very windy that night. Its hair was actually blown across its face, and you could see the hair kind of was hitting its shoulders and blowing across its face. It had huge eyes. I would say, we both talked about it after this. I'd say like the size of a golf ball, roughly. Way bigger than I'd never seen a human with eyes like that.
I can't talk to family, can't talk to my wife about it, although I think they're slowly beginning to understand that what I've experienced is really real, and actually with the audio accumulation over the past 6+ years, I think it's rather unique because I've been consistently being able to get really out of this world type of audio and vocal expressions from beings that I can't identify other than, the fact that they exist and they live in our woods.
There is some contention within the field as to whether or not paranormal connections should be entertained while collecting Sasquatch reports. This is nothing new. The 1924 Ape Canyon incident near Mount St. Helens is fairly well known, and most Bigfoot enthusiasts are aware of the alleged attack on the prospector's cabin. What tends to be underreported is the fact that Fred Beck, one of the principal witnesses, consulted a spirit guide in the process of prospecting for gold, and considered the apes they saw as some sort of spiritual beings. Much of the time, this information is omitted from the Ape Canyon discussion, an editorial decision that has more to do with worldview than historical accuracy.
Well, putting it that way, if they do, they shouldn't. Everything that is turned into an investigator research or whatever should be cataloged, and if it's, if someone asks, has that type of an incident ever come to light, they should be willing to discuss it. I don't think that you should withhold anything unless it's absolutely, very sensitive or very critical, that it shouldn't be discussed publicly until you've made further progress with it.
The question remains, does it hurt or hinder the cataloging and discovery of this unknown species if investigators include, or exclude, some of the more far-reaching aspects. Researchers often receive a wide variety of reports, some of which seem highly plausible, and others that strain credulity. It's up to the individual researcher to evaluate, organize, and convey reports to the public.
I don't think, like with the Tri-County UFO Study Group, when I first started going there in 1985, they were UFOs, mainly about UFOs, but they had the Bigfoot that they had discussed too. So they didn't try to present, when I first started going there, they didn't try to present, hey, here's what happened in Rome, here's what happened in Minerva, and so on. Here's what we think is real, and this is the way you should think, or this is what we want you to believe. They didn't try to do that. And I think as long as a researcher or an investigator does things on their own to the fullest of their ability, catalogs it, documents it, and so on, I don't think there's an issue with them discussing that publicly or otherwise, even if they try to convince you of it. You know, some people are just so adamant because they believe that that's what the case is. And maybe it's real. Maybe they're on top of things more than other people are, and maybe they have the answer, but yet they don't know it, you know, because of what they've investigated. So I don't think there's an issue with people trying to connect the two. Like I say, we don't know for sure yet what the answer is to what the existence of Sasquatch or otherwise is. So
you really have to be very disciplined in how you gather and catalog data. But with high strangeness, for example, I think it's important to point out that the original use of that term actually comes from the UFO world, and J. Allen Hynek is the one that I've seen as the person who's responsible for coining the phrase, or at least popularizing it in common usage. And in that case, high strangeness is nothing more or less than weird things happening at the same time. So in his case, he was talking about UFOs, like a craft or a flying saucer being seen with orbs in the same proximity, or UFOs plus strange occupants being seen exiting that. Now you've got high strangeness because it's two anomalies right next to one another. So in some cases, there's not necessarily a need to separate the two. They just happen to be in the same place at the same time. High strangeness, I think, has come to mean, among some people, paranormal, quote unquote. And it doesn't necessarily mean that. You know, you could have, like in the case of the Minerva monster, for example, you could have Bigfoot being seen in proximity to panthers or mountain lions. That's high strangeness by definition. There's nothing paranormal necessarily about either creature, but the fact that they're seen together is what puts it into that category. And so then you can just say, well, what were they doing together? And those are valid questions. But I think it is, if people want to separate supernatural causes or phenomena apart from a material world living primate, that's their prerogative. They can do that, but it might be more interesting to see those two things together, or a multiplicity of things together, Bigfoot with an orb, with something seen in the sky. Well, why? What was happening that night, perhaps, that caused all those things to be seen together legitimately?
Often they must weigh the outcome of a full disclosure approach, wrestling with the question, does it hurt the credibility of the field to include details of sightings that are outside the realm of the natural world?
I think whatever you specialize in, you're gonna focus more on in general too. So it's like like I said, I've had reports of, where people say that they just disappeared, and I don't really know other than the fact that my explanation is you don't have to walk into a portal. Their camouflage is an amazing thing, and I've seen people in just a ghillie suit in general who can step only 10 feet back and you won't even know they're there. So I think personally it's like that. But if you specialize in one field, you're going to lean more towards that. So for me, if I were to get more really paranormal side of it, I would do an investigation, but I would try to contact somebody I know who is more into the paranormal side and let them know that I had that report also.
There were all kinds of reports that were coming in from Damascus, Ohio, the Salem area, which I had had a few from there before, but these were from hunters and fishermen who weren't into Bigfoot, didn't know each other, and got a slew of reports from there. So I'm just giving that as an example how the year before and this year were very different. If your problem is that people argue about it all the time, I guess that's a problem.
The high strangeness thing happens. Weird things happen in the woods. Now the question is it Bigfoot related or not? You know, the big thing like people are talking about is orbs. You know, and orbs and Bigfoot. I've seen orbs. I've seen orbs, I've seen Bigfoot or heard of it in that area and been out there on an expedition or whatever and had some Bigfoot related activity and the orbs. Now the question is, are they related or are they just totally happenstance?
I was reluctant to put some of those stories in some of my earlier books, but surprisingly enough, when I started to do that, I had other witnesses say, yeah, the thing did disappear, but I didn't tell you that because I was afraid you wouldn't believe anything I'd told you. And how it disappeared, I don't have a clue, whether it, you know, did enter a portal or I don't know. But, you know, if you get enough people telling you things like that, it makes you wonder, well, is there a connection here? Is this true?
And it could be because Stan's association with MUFON and me obviously being a total Bigfoot investigator. So yes, so a lot of people that might have an incident might say, hey, I'm not gonna go to him, he's a Bigfoot guy. I'd rather go to the MUFON rep in Ohio and maybe there would be some difference. So yes, of course that could happen.
Despite individual preferences, such as the desire to maintain scientific integrity in the field of hominoid investigation, there's no denying that even the most hardened of skeptical researchers have come across at least one extremely strange sighting in their career of recording encounters. Even when said researcher is reluctant to endorse such an account, the stories remain memorable for their oddities and may contain information that confirms a later breakthrough.
I think there is probably a handful, at least, of situations where Bigfoot is sort of hiding in the shadows, almost literally, of people. I also think that they get a sense of our patterns. Like, there's always reports of Bigfoot being seen in and around farms and along tree lines and in places where they're used to being able to go, like a fully grown cornfield provides a lot of cover. As soon as that corn is harvested, now some of their ways of getting from point A to point B have vanished, or else they'd be walking out in the open. So I think that there's a demonstrable number of reports from Ohio of farmers who have been out, you know, doing their business, and they look out of the corner of their eye and they see in the tree line Bigfoot who's probably been opportunistically feeding on the crops or whatever those farmers are producing.
In 1977, there, I believe it was Tupelo, Mississippi, there was a film that was shot. It was 8mm. There was a family that was on an outing, and on their way back home, they had this Super 8 movie camera, and they seen this thing on the opposite side of a set of railroad tracks. These railroad tracks were 4 feet high because of the terrain and all that, the water that was in the area or whatever. On the other side of the railroad tracks, above the railroad tracks, another 4 feet, was a black hair-covered individual walking. They took movie film of it. That movie became known as the Mississippi film. There was a researcher whom I will not name who was able to get a first-hand copy of the film. He knew people at the JPL laboratory in California. He sent a copy of the film from still photos and all that he took off of his refrigerator to the JPL lab in California. They did computer enhancement on it. I also, just for the sake of curiosity, happen to have an 8.5 by 11 color print of the 3 frames that they did with the Mississippi film, that the JPL did. That's why I can tell you that I know for a fact that it looks extremely close to human, except for the fact that it's covered with hair. That's one that very few people know about because it didn't hit the media, it didn't hit the press. Only a handful or so of researchers knew about it because on a close inner circle was who discussed it, who knew about it, you know. So the Mississippi film may be one of the best pieces of evidence out there, you know, on top of the Patterson film.
There was one time in Salt Fork, I was in part of the park, the northern end of the park, where a lot of people don't go. You have to go outside the park to get into it. And it was the day after Christmas, and I was down there with the person I was dating at the time. And we just went out to this area, and you'd swear to God that you remember the old TV shows where the women would hang up their laundry and hum and sing along or whatever? Could hear as, you know, off in the distance as light as day. There was nobody there. There weren't houses anywhere. The nearest house was 1.5 miles away. How do you explain that? You can't. Is it weird? Did it happen? Yes. Does it have anything to do with Bigfoot? I don't think so, but it's possible. But weird things do happen out there. Weird lights happen, you know. UFOs, I've seen where one of my witnesses was, I've seen a UFO on that property. Does that mean that it has anything to do with the Bigfoot? No, actually a year later we had Bigfoot screams come from that property. But that doesn't mean they're related.
When people go out and look for Bigfoot, you know, we have, as I always say, that Bigfoot meter is going off in your brain. I want to find Bigfoot. I want to find Bigfoot. Well, believe me, we get out of the car, a whole group of us, and there's a Bigfoot, you know, 100 feet away in the woods. What's going on? Oh, they're looking for me. You know, they stay away. And unfortunate for us is we wear deodorant, we brush our teeth, we comb our hair, we wear lotion, and we make rings that make noise and phones that make noise. They hear everything. I mean, and they're so acute compared to us because, like I say, they have an unbelievable sight, unbelievable hearing. It's so obvious they do. When people say, well, I saw this thing on the mountainside. What was it doing? It looked like it was observing us, but I was looking through binoculars at it. Well, they're looking with no binoculars. So what does that tell you? They can see great distances and they understand, and they know humans have bad intent, so.
There is always the concern that personal bias could influence the way a researcher interprets the reports that are received. This requires some self-awareness on the part of those who compile Sasquatch files, including honesty about how their own beliefs and experiences might influence their interaction with the data.
If a track line suddenly comes to an abrupt stop and you see this line and then it doesn't continue even though it should, explanation-wise, the idea that it stepped into a portal and now is gone, narratively is satisfying. And you think, well, that makes some sense anyway, at least in terms of offering an explanation. So the problem becomes then, if that explanation satisfies me, then I'm going to start to interpret all the evidence that crosses my path through that lens. So that I think, well, all Bigfoot must clearly be interdimensional because of this one situation that I've come across. And the problem with that is then you sort of blind yourself to what evidence actually has presented itself, but you've got your blinders on to this one way that makes sense to you, and it sort of filters out the rest. That's the real problem with it that I see.
I know a lot of folks out there that are adamant that they're, 100% flesh and blood, and this woo stuff is incredible. But I've experienced things beyond, not even the Sasquatch. in a church, a Catholic church. I'm not even Catholic. I witnessed a play of light that was just nothing other than miraculous, if you will. It was an incredible witness experience, and it just reinforces the thought that this world is a supernatural world. I would rather be in that camp than be someone who's so ardent in their position and really recalcitrant, inflexible in both thought and mind and imagination. I think it was Aristotle or Plato, one of the two, said the masses are incurably ignorant, and your general population is typically generally ignorant of this matter, of other supernatural matters, and it's a big pill to swallow intellectually. I wish academia and the scientific community would take this more seriously, because the weight of the evidence, mostly eyewitness testimony, is enough to win in any court. Where am I going? The totality of evidence in this Bigfoot thing, even in the presence of all the weird stuff, suggested that the phenomenon is real. It actually demands that this is real. So if academia and the scientific community would get off their academic butts and get past their own little pompous, self-righteous views of the world, then I think we can get some serious people. But that's, we wouldn't be here today if that weren't a challenge. It is a challenge to get the general population and other folks involved. But I think it's so important because it really gets down to the questions of our very existence. Where do we come from? Why are we the only species on the planet that is not naturally adapted to live in all climes of this earth?
Well, some people adhere to the flesh and blood theory. Other people, not so much. They're convinced that these things are interdimensional, or possibly a government study. Something went awry and now they've got these creatures out there. They're how do you pronounce it, the Nephilim? Nephilim. There's all kinds of theories out there. Until we actually get our hands on one to study it, and we may have already had that happen, but I think it's been covered up. We don't know yet.
If we're going to treat this subject seriously, I think we have to have science and proof and documentation and evidence to, put it forward so that people stop saying that they're coming out of spaceships. It's very important to have the evidence. So, yep, we can't prove it. What those red orbs were, we can't prove that they're connected. We don't even know what they are. No one's captured them. I mean, sometimes you see things on video, but there's just no way to make that connection except for coincidence.
It also begs the question, do researchers who are known to be open to high strangeness cases invite more witnesses to come forward, thereby coloring their region as weirder than other geographic locations? Are given areas actually affected by their most prominent researchers?
I'm sure that I get more of the flesh and blood type of reports than maybe somebody who their whole focus is on that. I would think that that would make sense. And I hope that I present myself in a way that people really do understand that I'm not going to laugh at them no matter what they tell me. I did have one report, and this is the truth, where one I had where I went to call the witness, and it was something like, like on The Simpsons, where they, see more butts, or something like that, and then I was like, haha, and the guy starts laughing on the phone. He's like, I can't believe you called me. But I didn't get it until I said it out loud. But then there was another one where a guy said that Bigfoot was stealing beer out of his aunt's garage, like that kind of stuff. I'll laugh about it and then I'll be like, no. But if somebody's like the gentleman and his wife that said they saw this Bigfoot that was changing colors, I'm not going to laugh about that. So I hope people will approach me either way, but I'm sure that, you know, my focus, for good or bad, is with a natural creature. So I bet I get more of those types of reports than someone who has something that's very different.
Yeah, I do think that there is most likely a symbiotic relationship, right, between the person who's willing to talk about this with other people and the reports that come in. So if there is a sense in which a certain researcher kind of creates a sense that this is a stranger place than others, it may just be because they've shown themselves to be trustworthy and they're not going to make somebody feel terrible or stupid for coming forward with their story. So I think those two things may work together, but it's for a more altruistic good reason than it is like we're only getting reports because this guy's fabricating stories. I don't think that that's happening.
I don't criticize or ridicule anybody for their theories because we really just don't have the firm answer in our grasp at this point in time as to what this thing is.
Investigators into the unusual and unexplained are regularly cautioned against the impulse to explain one mystery with another mystery. This is sound advice, to be sure. However, this does not mean that an episode of true high strangeness must be automatically discounted or ignored. This calls for careful observation, an understanding of human nature that is open-minded but not naive, and enough humility to accept that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy.
Well, you can't explain one mystery with another mystery, right? And there's some truth to that. I think if you're trying to explain something, to say, well, we don't know this and we don't know that, but if you put them together, all of a sudden you have answers, I think is a little wishful thinking, probably. But in terms of high strangeness, the real problem I see with it is that actually it has great explanatory power in a narrative way. What I mean by that is if a track line suddenly comes to an abrupt stop and you see this line and then it doesn't continue even though it should, explanation-wise, the idea that it stepped into a portal and now is gone, narratively is satisfying. And you think, well, that makes some sense anyway, at least in terms of offering an explanation. So the problem becomes then, if that explanation satisfies me, then I'm going to start to interpret all the evidence that crosses my path through that lens.
To me, paranormal can just be something that really is normal that you can't explain. You don't have the ability to explain it yet. And there's all kinds of things that science can't explain yet. So just because it is paranormal right now doesn't mean it won't be mainstream in the future. Everybody has a place in Bigfoot research. Do your thing. We'll see who comes up with the evidence at the end. You shouldn't be afraid of somebody with a different opinion.
All bets are off now. Everybody's getting into the UFO aspect, and there could be a connection to that alien connection. I'm not saying they're not Gigantopithecus. What I'm saying is they could be everything in between, starting off with Gigantopithecus all the way to aliens or Nephilims.
There's two factions basically, but I don't think they need to be divided. If I have a piece of the puzzle and you have a piece of the puzzle and somebody else has a piece of the puzzle and they actually don't, even if it is on a paranormal side, if they have something kind of good evidence outside of the paranormal, it's like, come talk to me. I would be more than willing to work with anybody. And because how do you put a puzzle together if you don't have all the pieces? For us specifically, it is hard enough for us to prove things without adding the paranormal, which a lot of academia doesn't accept at all anyway.
To me, the most obvious one that there's always debate about is what they call woo and interdimensional beings. I have a problem with it. I'm in the flesh and blood camp, and that I find that it's possible and people do talk about it. Is it probable? Not in the science we have currently now. And with that, you can't answer questions with other questions that need answers too. It leads to a circular spiral, and it becomes a argument or discussion that just becomes circular because there is no answer, obviously.
There's all kinds of theories out there. Until we actually get our hands on one to study it, and we may have already had that happen, but I think it's been covered up. We don't know yet.
Something about just because the phenomenon cannot be proven does not mean that the phenomenon should not be studied. And maybe one day we will figure out what it is, swamp gas or something else like that. But I think all this stuff should be studied. And one of these days we will have discovery, and then we can go back on all the evidence and everything that we've done so far, and hopefully, it shows up to be a real animal.
You have to consider everything, and until we raise our level of understanding of this phenomenon, you have to consider everything.
My name is Steph. My friends have called me Tess all my life. I was born in Michigan, lived out of state for a long time, came back to Michigan, and was here for a year in a home that my husband and I purchased while he finished up business down south. And in the time that he was out of state, I was living in this it's an old house, but it's a new property to us, for a year before he came back. In the time that he was gone, I was telling him, I think this place is haunted, because stuff kept happening. I kept hearing things. We'd hear chairs moving. We'd hear activity in the house that, even though I'm armed, a lot of the time, I'd check out, there's nothing there, but it was still scaring us. And in thinking that the house was haunted and telling him that doesn't play well with a husband who's absent. He must have thought I was giving into stress or something. I don't know what he thought. But by the time he'd come back, and I'm still going on about what I'm hearing and what he doesn't hear, that was awful. There's a phenomenon where people become aware there's something wrong at night, but they can't get out of bed. They can't stir themselves. And that was happening to us. My husband, if something scared the daylights out of me, I might scream. He could never hear me. I could shout. He would never hear me. I'd look over at his bed. I have looked over at his bed, and his bed would be shaking, shuffling. He's not waking up. I tell him about it the next morning, and it's one of those, I didn't know anything about it. And of course, the stranger the stories get, the more I get that look on his face that's just tearing me up. And I'm hearing outside the house, I'm hearing massive footsteps. Nothing, no deer make sounds like this. Step, step, step. I was hearing what I thought were, you ever been to a powwow? It's the best I could come up with. I tried to tell James about it the other day. If you've been to a powwow, you'll hear the dancer's feet. And I was hearing that. And I was hearing what I thought was someone playing a flute. And the best I could describe that was like a Japanese low-tone flute. And realized in listening to this that there had to have been two persons, because I'm hearing a measure and then a counter. And they were playing together, and you'd only hear them very low. But it was music. My husband at the time was telling me that he could hear sometimes what he thought was the sound of like a trumpet playing distantly. At a point in that same period of time, this is accumulated events, I'm hearing someone singing. And it was a beautiful, beautiful voice. I don't, mellow, sweet, peaceful, beautiful, feminine. I think that they're there more than just seasonally, but seasonally things ramp up. They can also make these sounds with their mouths. I have a Siamese cat that was a young feller sitting in the living room window, summer, windows open, getting toward evening, just starting to dark a little bit. I'm in the living room chair, my husband's sitting on the couch, cat's in the window, and we had one run past the living room, again, the living room windows, and I couldn't say whether it were a dirty white or a light gray, but it was moving. It was really moving. And my cat must have caught it the same moment I did, because the cat pretty much levitated. He looked like he'd been shot out of a cannon. He was gone out of that window immediately. And so cat knows what's going on. As time has passed, listening to podcasts and things, I've heard folks mention mind speak. And if I had not encountered that myself, I would have say this person. But it is my habit to, people don't like the idea, I suppose, I'll put out food every single night for all kinds of critters. And I often, very often, bake cornbread and set it out there to the side of the house where my windows get pattered on and all that. Settling down for the evening, felt, heard, you'll get it, if you want to credit it as mind speak, inside the back of my head. If you were wearing a stereo headset, you hear inside the middle of your head, if it well balanced. Okay, I heard her, I call her the lady, I don't know what else to call her, laugh, just chuckle, and it was a sweet sound. And in doing that, she said, I want to say thank you. Visually, she's giving me the idea of her child, her son, her little boy, for the candy. Thank you for the candy. They don't have a word for cake or sugar or what, but she understood candy. Thank you for the candy. The little boy loved it.
If there really are Sasquatch in the Heartland, then clearly we have much yet to learn.